Hello my beautiful friends, don't forget to leave that like, subscribe to the channel, and comment slime. The anime begins with our protagonist named Satoru Mikami. Before he was stabbed while trying to save his friend, he was an ordinary 37-year-old worker living in the big city of Tokyo. He was almost satisfied with his monotonous life. He had a good job, earned well, but he was not married yet, and had not formed a family. In fact, he had not even lost his virginity. While he suffered from the stab wound, a mysterious voice granted him a resistance to heat and cold, physical resistance, and various other useful abilities, along with his unique skill that had not yet been revealed. But before departing for another world, he asked his friend to destroy his computer, along with all of its memory. After regaining consciousness, Satoru discovers that he reincarnated as a slime in an unfamiliar world. While exploring the place where he appeared, he wonders what is happening and what he should eat, especially since he does not even feel the need to go to the bathroom. Suddenly, a voice speaks to him, saying that everything he consumes is stored in the stomach of his unique skill. Frightened, he realizes that he had already heard that voice when he was stabbed, and asks who it is. The voice responds that it is the effect of his unique skill Predator, and calls him Master. Satoru gets very confused and asks what this skill is used for, and the voice explains that it allows him to devour objects and analyze them inside his own body in order to acquire their skills. After the analysis is completed, he can also mimic these objects. When he hears this, he wonders if he can analyze a plant, and the voice responds that it is a hippocute herb used to create high-grade healing potions. With this information, he decides to devour all the plants in the place so he can later turn them into potions. As soon as he finishes swallowing all the plants in the cave, he climbs onto a large luminous rock and asks the voice if that rock is useful for anything. When he discovers that it is extremely valuable magic ore, he decides to devour all of them as well. While continuing to devour everything, he ends up falling into a lake. When he reaches the bottom, he becomes very worried because he does not know how to get out of there. So an idea crosses his mind. Satoru decides to absorb the water and then use it as propulsion, and finally manages to launch himself out. However, due to the speed at which he was propelled, he ends up crashing hard against a wall and wonders why he did not feel any pain. Facing this doubt, the voice explains that he possesses a skill that completely cancels out the sensation of pain. Upon hearing this, he thinks that he will need to be more careful. At that moment, a deep voice asks if he can hear it. Satoru decides not to answer, but the voice insists, saying it knows he is listening and demands an immediate response. Satoru explains that he has no mouth to respond and inwardly finds the situation overwhelming. This irritates the majestic creature, who reveals itself to be a dragon, and as they interact, Satoru grows startled and explains that he has no eyes or mouth, which is why he thought the dragon could not hear his thoughts. The dragon begins to laugh and says it can grant him vision, on the condition that he does not get scared upon seeing it, since it has been sealed for 300 years and is bored of being alone. The slime responds that he is curious to know why it was imprisoned, and therefore accepts the proposal. The dragon then explains that there is a skill called Magic Sense, which allows perceiving the surrounding magicules. Satoru tries to use this skill and manages to awaken it. The voice inside his mind asks if he wishes to activate it. Satoru gets very excited and responds yes, and for the very first time he is able to see. Quickly, he goes to the water to confirm if he really is a slime, and then looks toward the voice that helped him, receiving an enormous shock when he realizes it belongs to a giant dragon. The dragon asks him to draw closer and introduces itself as Veldora, the storm dragon, one of the 4 true dragons that exist in that world. After introducing itself, it asks him if he remembers the promise he made. Satoru responds yes and says that they can continue chatting afterward. However, the dragon interrupts him and comments that there is something it cannot understand, because slimes are low-level monsters incapable of thinking or possessing consciousness. It then asks if he is an exception. Satoru responds that he does not know for sure, since he used to be a human, but was stabbed and after dying woke up in that body. Upon hearing this, the dragon explains that he arrived in that world in a very unusual manner, because normally only souls cross over, being known as otherworlders. With this information, Satoru wonders if there are other Japanese people in that world, and decides that he will search for them. Realizing that he intends to leave, the dragon becomes very sad and asks if he is already departing. Satoru responds that he can stay a little longer, so Veldora shares that 300 years ago, he destroyed a city by accident because someone was trying to hunt him down. However, the one who confronted him was an extremely powerful human hero, who used the unique skill Unlimited Imprisonment to defeat and seal him. Upon hearing this story, Satoru asks if he has been trapped in that place ever since he was sealed by that hero. The dragon confirms that he has, and says that ever since then he has been living in complete boredom. Satoru remarks that he spent 37 years feeling lonely, having never even had a girlfriend, and therefore cannot even imagine what it must be like to spend 300 years completely isolated. After those words, he asks the dragon if he would like to be his friend. This proposal leaves Veldora indignant, as he cannot believe a simple slime is offering him friendship. But the dragon swallows his pride and accepts the proposal. The two then shake hands to seal their friendship. Meanwhile, back in Japan, Tamura is seen destroying Satoru's computer just as he had promised, swearing that if he ever has a child, he will name him Satoru. Back in the cave, Satoru tells the dragon that he feels bad, knowing that a friend has been trapped for 300 years. These words move the dragon emotionally, and he responds that he would be very grateful if there were any way to free him, since according to his calculations, fewer than 100 years remain before his magical energy is completely depleted. Satoru asks what will happen when all of his magic energy runs out, and the dragon responds that he will simply die. This response makes Satoru reflect deeply. He approaches the magical barrier and asks the voice of his skill to use Predator to consume the barrier's magic. But the moment he tries to do so, the voice informs him that it is impossible, explaining that the only possibility would be to analyze the barrier both from the inside and the outside. Upon hearing this, Satoru tells the dragon that they need to analyze the magical barrier from both sides. The dragon responds that he cannot analyze it from the inside because all of his skills are sealed. Satoru then explains that if the dragon provides the data from the interior, he will be able to analyze it from the outside. The dragon responds that this process would take a very long time. Satoru agrees and asks if he would consent to entering his stomach. The plan consists of using his skills to analyze the unlimited imprisonment inside his stomach, while the dragon attempts to destroy the barrier from the inside. That way, he would remain separate from the slime's stomach space and would not disappear. Upon hearing this idea, the dragon begins to laugh and says it is worth trying, as the proposal sounds very interesting. Before putting the plan into practice, the dragon mentions that the two of them must give names to each other so that it becomes engraved upon their souls, symbolizing that they are now equals. Satoru agrees and begins to think of an appropriate family name for his new friend. After reflecting, he decides to name their family Tempest. Upon hearing the name, the dragon repeats it aloud with great excitement, saying he finds the name fantastic. From that moment on, he comes to be known as Veldora Tempest. Next, the dragon says that he will also grant a name to Satoru and bestows upon him the name Rimuru. From then on, he will be Rimuru Tempest. And at the exact moment the two exchange their names, an intense glow illuminates the area as Rimuru's soul receives a divine protection. As soon as the ritual ends, Rimuru devours Veldora, while Veldora works to break unlimited imprisonment from within. In this manner, the two come to coexist, initiating the process that will one day allow the dragon to be set free. After a few days in the kingdom of Blumund, Minister Vriard asks Fuse, the guildmaster, what measures he intends to take now that Veldora has vanished. Fuse responds that he has no specific plan, which leaves Vriard quite irritated, asserting that the dragon's disappearance will cause immense commotion among magical beings and neighboring nations. With little patience, Fuse responds that he will only agree to investigate the case because the two of them are old friends, deciding to head directly to the region himself. Meanwhile, inside the cave, Rimuru continues exploring new areas and wonders how much time has passed since he devoured his friend. While searching for an exit, he awakens several new skills, until suddenly he encounters a massive black snake standing right before him. After that, Rimuru decides to utilize his new skills to defeat the serpent, and before continuing his journey, he devours it to acquire its abilities, subsequently facing various monsters throughout his trek to absorb their powers as well. After several weeks wandering through the cave, he finally finds the exit. He begins to ponder what kind of attack to use in order to destroy the door, but suddenly it opens all on its own, revealing 3 adventurers. Rimuru thinks fast and hides among the rocks, feeling glad to see human beings once again. Immediately after, one of the adventurers uses a stealth skill to turn invisible and explore the cave, and Rimuru takes advantage of that moment to escape unnoticed. Later, out in the forest, Rimuru continues walking while thinking about his friend Veldora. Along the way, he encounters a group of goblins. Upon seeing them, he imagines that they are very weak. Since the goblins can perceive his thoughts, they ask if he has any business in that region, realizing that he can communicate with them. Rimuru uses his mouth to introduce himself, which ends up scaring everyone due to the sheer loudness of his voice. Next, he asks if they need anything. The goblins respond that when they felt his immense presence, they decided to look for him to ask for his help, and they then lead him to their village. Upon arriving there, the village leader explains that their god disappeared a month ago, and ever since, the monsters in the region have not stopped attacking them, which is why they hoped he could help them. Rimuru responds that he is merely a simple slime, and does not believe he is capable of fulfilling the request. However, the goblin leader tells him not to be so modest, because an ordinary slime would never emit such a powerful aura. Upon hearing this, Rimuru asks the voice of his skill to allow him to observe himself from another perspective, and he realizes that all this time, he had been releasing a massive amount of magicules without even realizing it. The leader then explains that around 100 direwolves have been constantly attacking the village, and that many warriors have already died trying to face them, including his own son. After hearing this story, Rimuru asks what he will receive in return if he agrees to help them. The goblins respond that they will offer their absolute loyalty. At that moment, everyone hears the howl of a direwolf echoing through the forest. Rimuru then declares that they will all fight together to defeat the enemies, and that was how he ended up becoming the leader as well as the protector of the goblin village. After that, Rimuru begins to analyze the goblins to discover how many of them are capable of fighting by his side. But he soon notices that the vast majority are far too weakened and fragile to battle. Faced with this, he asks them to take him to the injured warriors. Rimuru uses the healing potions he had created earlier, and thanks to them, he manages to save all the wounded warriors. During the night, the army of direwolves arrives at the goblin village to invade it and destroy everything, but they come across a large fence protecting the entrance. The direwolf leader scoffs at the barricade, believing it will not be capable of stopping them. But right at that moment, his son notices that Rimuru is standing on the front line of the battle. Immediately after, Rimuru orders the wolves to leave the premises, but the leader responds that he would never take orders from a simple slime, and promptly orders the entire army to attack. However, the attack fails completely, because the wolves end up trapped by sticky steel thread spread across the battlefield. Noticing this, the direwolf leader decides to attack Rimuru personally, but he also ends up trapped within the threads. With the enemy completely vulnerable, Rimuru seizes the opportunity and uses his water blade, decapitating the leader with a single strike. Next, he uses his skill to devour the body of his opponent, and in this manner assumes the position of pack leader. Right after, he unleashes a powerful roar, ordering all the wolves to retreat immediately and stand down. Upon hearing the voice of their new leader, the direwolves approach Rimuru and surrender completely to him. The following morning, Rimuru notices that the wolves have remained in the village alongside the goblins, so he decides to reorganize the entire community, stating that from that moment on, everyone will live in pairs. Each pair will be responsible for gathering resources to build enough shelters for everyone. But before they begin the work, he asks for everyone's names and discovers that none of them possess a name. Faced with this, he announces that his first task will be to bestow names upon everyone. The news leaves both the goblins and the wolves extremely excited, and they quickly form a line to receive their new names. Rimuru begins by naming the goblin leader Rigurd, in honor of the son who had been killed, and then gives the leader's younger son the name Rigger, so that he may carry the same name as his deceased brother. Next, he continues giving names to all the goblins in the village. When it becomes the wolves' turn, he decides to name the former leader's son Ranga. But the moment he is about to name the next wolf, Rimuru suddenly begins to feel unwell. The voice of his skill informs him that his magicule energy reserve has dropped below the minimum acceptable level, and that he will need 3 days to fully recover. After those 3 days, Rimuru wakes up completely recovered and finds Rigurd looking vastly different from before. Upon seeing him awake, Rigurd explains that by naming everyone, Rimuru also raised each individual's power level, causing them to evolve into higher forms of monsters. Later, Rimuru speaks with Ranga and asks how all the wolves were able to evolve, considering that only he had received a name. Ranga responds that the direwolves exist as a single collective entity as a species, sharing the exact same bond among all members of the pack. Ranga explains that his race is linked by a unified consciousness, and therefore the name he received came to represent the entire clan as well. From that moment on, they all came to be known as Tempest Wolves. Right after, Ranga begins wagging his tail with such force that it creates a powerful gust of wind, launching Rimuru rolling down the hill. After talking with the wolves, Rimuru gathers all the village inhabitants and explains that in order to avoid future conflicts, it will be necessary to establish certain rules. He creates 3 fundamental laws. The first is that no one may attack humans, the second is that no fighting among the village residents themselves will be permitted, and the third dictates that no race may look down upon another. Upon hearing this rule, Rigurd asks why they cannot attack human. Rimuru explains that humans live organized in large societies and that any conflict against them would ultimately bring endless trouble to the village. After clarifying his decisions, he appoints Rigurd as the new Goblin King, and thanks to this structure, everyone begins working together toward the development of the community. However, Rimuru soon realizes an important problem. He knows that those responsible for building houses and crafting clothes lack proper skill. So Rigurd mentions that the dwarves of the armed nation of Dworgen are extremely talented in that line of work. Upon hearing this, Rimuru gets very excited and tells Rigurd to take care of the village while he sets off toward the city of Dworgen, accompanied by Ranga and 3 other goblins. During the journey to Dworgen, the group decides to rest near a river. While waiting for nightfall, Rimuru asks Rigurd who had given the name to his late brother. Rigurd responds that his brother received that name from a Magian named Jelmut, who is an officer in the Demon Lord's army. Upon hearing this, Rimuru hopes never to cross paths with that army. Next, he approaches Ranga and asks if he feels any desire to seek revenge for the death of his father. Ranga responds that he sometimes thinks about it, but whenever he remembers that Rimuru spared his life and granted a name to him and his pack, all his resentment vanishes, replaced entirely by gratitude. It is precisely for this reason that he offers his absolute loyalty, just like all the other members of the pack. Later during dinner, one of the goblins accompanying Rimuru asks Gobta, the group's guide, what the city of Dworgen is like. Gobta explains that it is a magnificent city built upon a massive underground cave system. Besides dwarves, humans, elves, and many other races reside there. He also mentions that the dwarven king named Gazel Dworgo is widely known as the Hero King. Upon hearing this, Rimuru wonders if a monster like himself will truly be welcome in such a place. Rigurd explains that Dworgen is a free trade city where any form of combat is strictly forbidden, and that this peace has been maintained thanks to the kingdom's military remaining undefeated for 1,000 years. 3 days later, the group finally arrives in Dworgen. To avoid drawing unnecessary attention, Rimuru decides that only he and Gobta will enter the city, while the others remain waiting outside. Upon reaching the gates of Dworgen, Rimuru and Gobta encounter a massive line to enter the city. While waiting, 2 human thugs approach and state that since they have not yet passed through the gates, they could kill them without any issue. Upon hearing this, Gobta becomes terrified and tells Rimuru that the last time he was there, those same men beat him up. Faced with this, Rimuru asks Gobta to close his eyes and cover his ears because he is about to break the very first rule he created, and he steps forward to warn the 2 men that they still have a chance to walk away. The humans grow furious, responding that they will not take orders from someone so weak. At that moment, Rimuru transforms into Ranga. They become thoroughly terrified. The 2 call their companions and they all charge into combat, but not a single one manages to land a scratch on him. Rimuru then utilizes the skill menace, releasing a powerful roar that terrifies and incapacitates everyone nearby. Noticing the commotion, the entrance guards rush to the scene to confront whoever is responsible. When they arrive, they only find Rimuru in his slime form and decide to arrest him alongside Gobta. Later, inside the prison cell, the captain of the guard, Kaido, tells Rimuru that since he is a slime and Gobta a goblin, they will have to remain locked up for a while until the situation is fully resolved. The guards likely believed those men were merely trying to intimidate them. Rimuru responds that this was precisely what happened, explaining that his sole intention was to scare them off. Immediately after, he apologizes for all the trouble he caused. At that moment, a guard interrupts the conversation to report that Armorsaurus monsters have appeared in the mine, and that Garm and his brothers who were collecting ores ended up severely injured. Kaido becomes extremely worried and orders everyone to search for healing potions immediately. Upon hearing this, Rimuru steps out of his cell and explains that he transformed a large barrel of water into the finest healing potion in existence. Trusting his words, Kaido agrees to use the contents of the barrel. That very same night, while Rimuru passes the time in his cell, Kaido returns accompanied by the men who had been injured. They all express their gratitude to him for saving their lives. Afterward, Kaido unlocks the cell and informs Rimuru that he is officially free to go. The 2 then sit down to enjoy dinner together. The following morning, Kaido takes Rimuru to meet his brother. His name is Kaijin, and he is one of the finest blacksmiths in the entire city. Shortly after, Dord and Garm appear and share that this very slime was the one who saved their lives. Upon hearing this, Kaijin greets Rimuru with deep respect. Rimuru states that in exchange for helping his friends, he would like to receive some armor, but the blacksmith responds that this is impossible because he is completely swamped with an order from Minister Vesta. Furthermore, he explains that he lacks the necessary materials to forge new equipment, as he requires magic ore. The previous day, his companions had set out to mine it, but were ambushed by the armor sources. Hearing this, Rimuru remembers that he had devoured that exact same ore while exploring the cave system, so he hands over a chunk to Kaijin. As soon as he sees the material, the blacksmith is utterly astonished, realizing that the magic ore was already refined, existing as a massive ingot of extraordinary high-quality magisteel. Kaijin is immensely impressed and states that he will do everything within his power to obtain more of that material. Rimuru responds that, in return, he wants Kaijin to come to his village to teach his craft to the residents. Additionally, he asks him to produce clothing, armor, and weapons for his community. The blacksmith agrees to all terms and explains that as soon as he finishes forging the 20 swords ordered by the minister, he will assist him with everything requested. At that moment, Rimuru asks to borrow one of the finished swords. He devours the weapon and requests Great Sage to produce copies of it. Within a few brief seconds, he creates 20 identical swords. Seeing this unfold, Kaijin is left utterly awestruck. Soon after, he and his companions invite Rimuru to celebrate at an establishment frequented by several lovely elves. Not being foolish in the slightest, Rimuru accepts the invitation without thinking twice. As soon as they arrive at the venue, the young elves begin competing for Rimuru's attention. Before long, the whole group is drinking and enjoying themselves alongside them. During the conversation, Rimuru explains how he managed to duplicate the swords, leaving everyone astonished. Kaijin then remarks that next time, he will craft a sword so sophisticated that it cannot be copied so easily. Next, one of the elves makes a gesture toward Rimuru and asks if he would like to try something special. Rimuru gets very excited, imagining mature, attractive elves in compromising situations. Flustered, he responds that perhaps that might not be a good idea, but the elf quickly brings him back to reality, explaining that she was merely referring to reading his fortune. Rimuru accepts, and she explains that her magic will reveal the woman destined to be by his side. The moment she activates the spell, the image of a beautiful young woman appears, and right at that instance, Minister Vesta enters the establishment and picks a fight with Kaijin, arguing that he should not be wasting time in a place like this when the deadline to deliver the 20 swords is rapidly approaching. Kaijin responds that the order has already been completed, leaving the minister thoroughly stunned. While observing the argument, Rimuru notices that Kaijin and Vesta clearly do not get along, and right after, Vesta notices Rimuru's presence, complaining bitterly about allowing such a vulgar monster into the venue. He then demands to know from one of the elves how she could let a creature like that enter the establishment. The elf responds that he is merely a harmless slime, and to calm the situation, she offers a drink to the minister. However, Vesta responds that even if it is just a slime, it remains a monster, and the minister then pours the drink directly over Rimuru. Rimuru remains calm to avoid causing trouble for his friend, but Kaijin then steps up and lands a well-aimed punch squarely on the minister's face. He then declares that the strike was for disrespecting his friend, striking him once more and knocking him down to the floor. Immediately after, Kaijin recalls that Rimuru was looking for skilled artisans and asks if he would be satisfied to take him along to his village. The proposal leaves Rimuru very happy, and he responds that he would have no reason whatsoever to settle for less, because if the artisan is Kaijin, his help will be more than welcome. Later, Kaido asks his handcuffed brother what he was thinking when he assaulted the minister. Kaijin responds that Vesta insulted his friend Rimuru, and that he merely put him in his proper place. Kaido explains that no one can simply strike a minister, and because of that, everyone, including Rimuru, will be detained until the day of the trial. Inside the cell, Kaijin apologizes to his companions for putting them in that situation. Rimuru tells him not to worry and remarks that the minister seemed to hold a massive grudge. Upon hearing this, Kaijin reveals that in the past he served directly under King Gazel Dwargo, and at that time Vesta was his assistant. One day, one of their joint projects failed, and Vesta presented false testimony to escape blame. Kaijin decided to take full responsibility for what occurred and left the military to become a blacksmith. Since then, Vesta harbored resentment against him and seized every opportunity to make absurd demands simply to ruin him. After sharing this story, Kaijin tells Rimuru that he now belongs entirely to him. Upon hearing this, Garm and his brothers also state that they will follow Kaijin wherever he goes. The following morning, the group appears at the trial and soon realizes that the defender assigned to represent them was bribed into giving false testimony against them. Faced with this corruption, the court announces a verdict sentencing Kaijin to 20 years of forced labor in the mines, while his companions receive 10 years of the exact same punishment. At that moment, the king interrupts the proceedings and asks Kaijin how he is doing. Granting him the opportunity to speak, Kaijin responds that he is glad to see him in good health, and the king then asks if he would have any interest in returning to serve in the royal military. Kaijin expresses gratitude for the offer, but explains that he has found a new master, and that the oath made to him is his greatest treasure, something he would not abandon even if it were an order from the king himself. Upon hearing this answer, Gazel announces his revised verdict. Instead of serving the hard labor sentence, Kaijin and his companions will be exiled from the kingdom. Following the trial, the king turns toward Vesta and asks if he has anything to say. The minister remains silent, so Gazel states that because of his actions, the kingdom lost an extraordinarily loyal subject. Vesta responds quite angrily that Kaijin had never sworn loyalty to him, so the king clarifies that he was not referring to Kaijin, but to Vesta himself, saying he expected far more from him and explaining that because of his foolish actions, they also lost the opportunity to establish a good relationship with Rimuru, that slime. Faced with these words, Vesta drops to his knees and, amidst tears, says that ever since he was a child, he always wished to be useful to the king, promptly begging for forgiveness for everything that transpired. Gazel responds simply that he no longer wishes to see him before his presence, stating that this whole ordeal was extremely exhausting. While at the entrance of the city, Kaido bids farewell to his brother and asks Rimuru to take good care of him. At that exact moment inside the castle, the king orders one of his knights to discreetly follow Rimuru, considering it unthinkable to simply let such a powerful monster depart without observation. A few weeks later, in the kingdom of Bluemund, Guildmaster Fuse asks his subordinates how the mission in the Great Forest of Jura went. Cabal states that they confirmed Veldora's disappearance, as they explored the entire cave and found no trace of the dragon whatsoever. Fuse says he understands everything they went through during the exploration, granting the group 3 days of rest. After that period, they must investigate the Great Forest of Jura itself instead of the cave. Outside, Cabal and Eren complain about having to return to the Great Forest of Jura after receiving so few days of rest. Suddenly, a masked woman appears behind them and asks if they were discussing an expedition to the forest. Cabal asks the reason for her interest, and the mysterious woman asks if she may accompany them. Eren accepts immediately with great enthusiasm, and the woman then introduces herself as Shizue. Meanwhile, Rimuru demonstrates to Ranga that he can assume his form and even utilize one of his most powerful attacks. Ranga is deeply impressed and remarks that it was incredible, after which the two walk together through the forest. While Rimuru observes how much the village has evolved, he remembers when he returned from Dworgen and found nearly 500 goblins seeking shelter, at which point he also granted them names, strengthening the community even further. Upon returning from their walk, Rimuru finds Gobta teaching the new residents how to summon Tempest Wolves, something that surprises Rimuru greatly, as he never imagined Gobta was capable of performing such a feat. Afterward, Rigurd, who had been promoted to Goblin King, steps forward, reports that several suspicious individuals were spotted roaming through the forest. Rimuru asks if they are monsters, but Rigurd responds that they are humans, suggesting they might be explorers sent by a kingdom interested in expanding its territory. Meanwhile, the group of human adventurers is being pursued by giant ants. Shizue utilizes her flame sword to defeat them. When the battle ends, she turns to her companions, but Eren notices that another giant ant is about to strike her. Before anyone can react, a massive black lightning bolt obliterates the monster completely. The blast is so intense that it blows away Shizue's mask. Amidst the dust, Rimuru remarks to himself that the attack was far too powerful and that he should probably refrain from using it again. The adventurers immediately assume combat stances, and upon realizing that the entity responsible for the attack is merely a slime, they are left in utter disbelief. Rimuru asks if they have a problem with slimes, and as he approaches Shizue, he hands back her mask while apologizing for the commotion. When he finally catches a glimpse of her face, he realizes she is the exact same beautiful woman that the elf fortune teller had shown him during his fortune reading. Afterward, Rimuru leads the adventurers to the residence he had provided for them. As he steps inside, he realizes that they are the very same youths he had encountered at the cave entrance some time ago. After Gobda introduces Rimuru as his master, the great Lord Rimuru, the four adventurers are left completely stunned. Iren remarks that they already suspected he was no ordinary slime, but they never imagined he could be the leader of the entire village. Thinking they might still be frightened, Rimuru states in a gentle tone that he is not a bad slime. This response causes Shizue to burst into laughter. Soon after, Cabal and his companions offer their apologies. Cabal explains that he never imagined he would be saved by a monster, let alone encounter an entire village of goblins. Rimuru inquires about what they were doing in the great forest of Jura, and the group responds that they are there on orders from Guildmaster Fuse of the Kingdom of Bluemund. Upon hearing this, Rimuru asks if the guild might cause any trouble regarding the establishment of his village. The adventurers reply that they do not believe so, prompting Rimuru to suggest that they stay overnight to rest before continuing their journey. Later on, Rimuru finds Shizue sitting alone, admiring the sunset, and asks if she is enjoying her time. Instead of answering directly, Shizue asks if the phrase he used during his introduction came from a game, mentioning that she had heard something similar from a girl back in her city. Immediately after, she scoops him up in her arms and asks if he also came from Japan, expressing immense joy at finally meeting someone from her homeland. Curious to learn how he ended up in this world, Rimuru shares that he was stabbed to death and subsequently reincarnated in the body of a slime. Upon hearing his story, Shizue explains that unlike him, she was summoned to this world. She begins to recall that it happened long ago, during a time when her city was being consumed by the flames of war. While fleeing alongside her mother, her life was transformed forever. Noticing the profound sadness on her face as she recalls those moments, Rimuru apologizes for bringing up such a painful past and offers to show her something far more uplifting. He then makes a request to Great Sage, utilizing thought communication to share his memories with her. Through this connection, Shizue gets to view Rimuru's memories of modern Japan, discovering that after the war, the nation rebuilt itself and prospered greatly. Suddenly, she experiences a sharp, painful pang in her chest. At that exact moment, Kaijin appears and calls out to Rimuru, stating that they need to discuss the construction of new houses. Meanwhile, Shizue remains by herself, completely submerged in her past memories. She recalls the day she was torn away from her mother to be presented to Ifrit. She then remembers the exact moment when Ifrit was forcibly sealed inside her body. During that time, the sorcerer Koni stood before Leon, declaring his intent to slay him in order to become the new demon lord. Leon, the very demon lord who had summoned Ifrit, commanded the flame spirit to eliminate Koni. Upon receiving the command, Koni cast his spells toward Shizue. Controlled entirely by Ifrit, she unleashed a devastating surge of power, defeating the sorcerer with absolute ease. Shortly after, the memory shifts once more. Shizue appears walking through a forest. She encounters a young girl caressing a small dog-like monster. Upon noticing her presence, the girl nervously explains that the creature strayed from its mother and begs Shizue not to tell anyone. Shizue smiles gently, reassuring her that she will keep the secret, and asks if they can care for the pup together. The girl accepts instantly with great joy. Following that, Shizue asks for the small creature's name. The girl responds that monsters do not possess names, so Shizue asks if she would like to call him Pizo. She thinks the name is wonderful, and the moment the small monster receives the name, it evolves and grows significantly in size. Sometime later, the two of them must bid each other farewell. Before departing, Shizue asks her new friend a question, wanting to know if she is truly certain that she will take Pizo to the castle, and she responds that there will be no issues. Upon arriving at the castle, they encounter a sorcerer, Demon Lord Leon. As soon as it catches sight of him, Pizo begins barking aggressively at him. In response, Leon takes control of Shizue's body and forces her to attack. Unable to resist, she ends up killing both her friend and the small monster, turning them both into dust. After everything concludes, Shizue begins to weep, unable to comprehend why her own body acted against her will. Suddenly, Shizue wakes up in her bed. While observing everyone sleeping, she begins to feel intense pain throughout her body. Unable to rest, she decides to go outside for a walk. As she contemplates the village from atop a hill, Rimuru appears and asks if she enjoyed the place. Shizue responds that she did, so Rimuru tells her that she will always be welcome and can return whenever she wishes. Shizue expresses her gratitude, but explains that she must continue her journey, as her presence might end up bringing trouble to everyone. Furthermore, her true goal is to find the person who summoned her to this world. Rimuru laments her departure and responds that the doors of the village will always remain open for her. Next, Iren asks Shizue why she does not simply return to Bluemund. Shizue responds that they are great adventurers, and that she is glad her final journey is precisely alongside them. When she hears this, Iren asks what she meant by her final journey. Shizue explains that she has been wandering through this world for decades, and that despite her youthful appearance, she has lived much longer than they imagine. After that, they proceed to the exit of the village, where Cabal and the others are already waiting. Suddenly, Shizue begins to feel intense pain once again. She drops to her knees and her mask begins to emit a powerful light. A massive cloud of black smoke rises into the sky, while an intense blaze completely envelops her body. Upon witnessing this scene, her companions realize who she truly is and ask if that is Shizue Izawa, the Conqueror of Flames, the legendary hero of the guild from 50 years ago. Rimuru observes everything and orders Rigurd to evacuate the entire village immediately. He sees Shizue completely consumed and controlled by Ifrit. The flame spirit summons 2 giant salamanders, which begin to set the entire village on fire. Rimuru tells the adventurers to flee immediately, but Cabal responds that this is impossible because Shizue is one of their companions, so the 3 draw their swords and prepare to fight. Rimuru asks Ifrit what he desires, but the spirit responds merely by attacking him and ordering his salamanders to finish him off. When the creatures advance, one of them is struck by Iren, who tells Rimuru that she and her companions will handle the monsters, while he should face Ifrit. Rimuru then summons Ranga, and while dodging enemy attacks, begins to consider whether unleashing all the water stored in his stomach will be sufficient to defeat the salamanders. Great Sage responds that if Rimuru releases all the water stored in his body, it will trigger a massive steam explosion. But upon noticing that Iren's attacks are working against the salamanders, Rimuru runs over to her and asks her to cast her magic directly at him. Even though surprised, Iren fulfills the request. Rimuru absorbs the spell completely and subsequently releases that power back against the 2 salamanders pursuing him, defeating both of them at once. Shortly after, he sees the 3rd salamandra advancing toward the 3 adventurers. The creature detonates its own body, causing severe injuries to all of them. Facing this situation, Rimuru orders Ranga to take the adventurers to a safe place immediately. As soon as everyone manages to escape, he finally faces Ifrit alone, and Ifrit creates several clones of himself to surround Rimuru. In response, the slime utilizes the magic he absorbed from Iren and manages to destroy all the clones. Ifrit grows extremely irritated and traps Rimuru inside a massive circle of flame. Surrounded by the blazes, Rimuru thinks with great panic that this might be his end, but he soon realizes that the fire causes him virtually no damage due to his natural resistances. Seizing the opportunity, he uses his sticky steel thread to bind Ifrit, and upon stepping out of the flames, asserts that the flame spirit underestimated him. Ifrit is thoroughly startled and attempts to break free, launching a powerful blast of fire against his adversary. Rimuru responds by activating his unique skill Predator, devouring Ifrit completely. Inside his body, Ifrit ends up encountering Veldora. The dragon states that he will never manage to escape from that place, and that he should cease resisting, as he will never be capable of defeating Rimuru since he is his sworn friend and companion. After the battle, Rimuru remains by Shizue's side, tending to her. When she awakens, she expresses her gratitude for being saved, and states that she would like her story to be remembered, thus beginning to share how Ifrit came to control her body. She explains that she once faced a legendary hero, and that after the battle, instead of taking her life, this hero asked why she was there and offered her comfort. It was also this very hero who gifted her the mask capable of suppressing magicules and helping her keep Ifrit under control. Holding the mask in her hands, Shizue continues her story. She shares that she experienced very happy moments traveling alongside the hero, until one day she was left behind, as the hero decided to continue her journey alone. As the years passed, Shizue aged, lost the ability to maintain full control over Ifrit, and eventually retired. Later, she became an instructor in the Freedom Academy in the Kingdom of Ingracia, where one of her students taught her a phrase from a video game, which years later caught Rimuru's attention. Rimuru remarks that it is an incredible story, and Shizue continues, saying she felt she no longer had anything left to teach anyone, and that perhaps sensing her own impending death had weakened her control over Ifrit. She explains that only a single memory remained alive in her heart. Which was why she set out to find the man who summoned her to this world, prompting Rimuru to ask if she sought revenge against him. Shizue responds that even she does not know for certain, but felt a deep need to find him for some reason. It was precisely because of this that she decided to join the group of adventurers. Following this, Shizue asks Rimuru for his name. Rimuru states his name, but she then clarifies that she wanted to know his true former name. Rimuru reveals that before coming to this world, he was named Satoru Mikami. Shizue smiles and shares that her true given name is Shizue Izawa. Immediately after, she makes one final request, asking Rimuru to devour her in the same manner he devoured the curse that tormented her throughout her entire life, as she no longer wishes to be bound to this world. Rimuru accepts her wish, and before devouring her, asks for the name of the person who summoned her into this world. Shizue responds that it was Leon Cromwell, one of the most powerful demon lords. Upon hearing this, Rimuru promises that he will fulfill her final wish, and before absorbing her, tells her that she may finally rest in peace. Afterward, Rigurd and the group of adventurers enter the room and find Rimuru standing in Shizue's human form. He then reverts back to his slime appearance and explains that her last request was to be devoured by him, also sharing that before departing, Shizue mentioned how much fun she had traveling alongside them despite all the troubles they experienced together. Upon hearing this, the adventurers begin bickering and jesting among themselves, and as Rimuru observes them, he reflects that it is far better to see them acting this way than completely consumed by grief. Later on, the time for departure arrived. Before leaving, the adventurers ask Rimuru to assume Shizue's form once more. He agrees, and upon transforming into her, they all express their gratitude for everything she did for them throughout their journey. Next, Rimuru remarks that the group's equipment is completely worn out and takes them to his artisans, presenting each of them with high-grade armor and gear. A few days after the adventurer's departure, Rimuru reflects upon Shizue's entire life and vows to fulfill the promise he made to her. Meanwhile, in another region, an orc walks exhaustedly through a scorching desert until he collapses onto the ground without strength. At that moment, another figure approaches and offers to grant him a name and food so that he may survive. The orc asks who he is, and the mysterious individual introduces himself as Gelmud, telling the orc that he may consider him a father. After the orc accepts the arrangement, Gelmud bestows upon him the name Geld and declares that one day they will conquer the entire great forest of Jura. Meanwhile, back in the village, the goblins alongside Kaijin and his brothers finish rebuilding all the homes. Noticing that everyone works diligently without needing orders, Rimuru returns to his private room, where he carefully stores Shizue's restored mask, and assumes his human form based on her once again. Shortly after, he realizes that his physical senses are far sharper when he is in his slime form. Curious, he asks Great Sage if he can also utilize Ifrit's skills. The voice responds that all of the Flame Spirit's abilities have already been completely analyzed, whereupon an excited Rimuru swiftly creates a clone of himself to test out his new capability. At one point, he decides to analyze his own body and notices that human reproductive organs were not recreated following his reincarnation, leaving him thoroughly disappointed. While putting on his clothes, he also notices that whenever he assumes human form, a black mist emerges around his body. Great Sage explains that this mist is formed by magicules and serves to compensate for the size difference between his slime form and his human form. Upon hearing this explanation, Rimuru experiments with recreating a more developed version of Shizue's appearance, but he immediately undoes the transformation, considering it disrespectful to faithfully reproduce Shizue's body and intimacy in that manner. Later, Rigurd asks Rimuru if he really does not require any more food. When he is about to respond, Rimuru remembers that now in his human form he can finally taste food. So he announces that from that moment on, he will be taking his meals alongside all the residents of the village. Upon hearing this, Rigurd gets very happy and says he will prepare a great feast to celebrate. Next, Rimuru goes to the goblins responsible for gathering food and asks them to search for the most delicious ingredients possible, as he intends to eat together with them. The residents are quite surprised, and Gobta then jests that Rimuru should eat plenty to see if his breasts will grow. Upon hearing the joke, Rimuru strikes him on the head. Rigurd immediately apologizes for Gobta's behavior and promises to punish him later. Next, he mentions that he will procure first-rate meat for the feast, as many magical beasts have recently appeared in the great forest of Jura. Upon learning this, Rimuru summons Ranga and orders him to accompany the gathering party to protect them should anything happen. After that, Rimuru returns to the cave where Veldora disappeared to test Degenerate, the unique skill he inherited from Shizue. As soon as he uses it, he awakens a new skill called Dark Flame. After the test, he puts on the mask that belonged to Shizue and right at that moment receives a distress signal sent by Ranga. Rimuru rushes immediately to the location and finds Gobta severely injured after facing two swordsmen. While as he approaches, he sees Ranga fighting against the other two enemies. Observing the situation, he notices that Rigor is also in combat. He orders Rigor to fall back near him, handing over a healing potion and asking Ranga what happened to the rest of their companions who fell during the confrontation. The wolf explains that they were not killed, but put to sleep by a pink-haired girl who utilized some form of magic. At that moment, the entire enemy group gathers, and Rigor informs Rimuru that he never imagined encountering ogres in that region. Upon discovering that his adversaries belong to the ogre race, Rimuru gets quite surprised and apologizes for whatever his subordinates might have done. One of the ogres demands that Rimuru reveal his true identity and calls him an evil creature. Rimuru gets confused and asks why he is being treated in such a manner. The ogre leader responds that only a wicked human would be capable of enslaving monsters. Rimuru attempts to clarify the situation, but the leader asserts that the mask he wears already reveals everything they need to know and declares that he will take his head. Upon seeing this threat, Ranga asks what they should do. Rimuru responds that Ranga should face the pink-haired ogre responsible for putting their companions to sleep. While Ranga distracts that enemy, Rimuru single-handedly faces the remaining 5 ogres. After dodging the attacks of 3 of them, he ends up being struck by a surprise sword blow, but the attack fails to inflict any damage upon him. The strike turns out to be entirely useless, as the sword shatters the moment it touches Rimuru's body. In response, he delivers a powerful punch that immediately neutralizes the ogre. After the fight loses intensity, Rimuru asks the ogre leader what they intend to do. At that moment, one of the ogres begins listing all the skills that Rimuru demonstrated during the combat, and this impresses Rimuru, who seizes the opportunity to request the leader to halt the battle, as he wishes to hear everything they have to say, but their leader responds that he acknowledges Rimuru's immense strength, and for that reason is certain that he is among those responsible for the attack on his people. Rimuru gets confused and asks what he is talking about. The leader explains that it is impossible for the ogres to have been defeated by the orcs alone, asserting that everything was certainly orchestrated by Rimuru's evil allies. At that moment, one of the ogres takes advantage of an opening and severs one of Rimuru's arms, convinced that he has finally won. The leader declares that this is the end of his opponent, but Rimuru simply places his own arm back in position and regenerates it instantly, subsequently asking if they truly believed they could defeat him merely by severing one of his arms. The ogre leader grows extremely furious and envelops Rimuru in an intense explosion of flames. Even so, Rimuru walks through the fire without suffering any injuries, affirming that this type of attack has no effect on him. He then admits that he had underestimated his opponents, removes the mask covering his face to reveal his true identity, and unleashes his entire aura, demonstrating the power of his black flame and great dark lightning skills. After displaying all his strength, he asks if they truly still wish to continue fighting. The ogre leader admits that none of them are capable of defeating Rimuru, yet he states that as the leader of the powerful ogre clan, he will continue fighting even knowing he will be defeated. At that moment, however, his sister stops him, saying that Rimuru cannot be the true culprit behind the attack on the village, since someone so powerful would never need to use the orcs to execute such a plan. Her words make the leader reflect. He lowers his sword and asks who Rimuru really is. Rimuru then reveals that he is merely a slime and returns to his true form, afterwards explaining that the mask he was wearing was a keepsake from a very important person to him. He then hands the mask over to the ogre leader so that he can examine it himself and confirm that Rimuru is not to blame for the attack. After realizing that Rimuru was telling the truth, the ogre leader apologizes for the misunderstanding. Rimuru then invites all of them to come to his village and recount in detail what happened. Thus, the battle comes to an end, and the two groups proceed together toward the village to participate in the grand feast. At the village, everyone watches closely as Rimuru tastes the food prepared by the goblins for the very first time. The moment he tries the first dish, he joyfully declares that it is delicious. Upon hearing this praise, all the goblins celebrate with relief. During the banquet, Rimuru takes the opportunity to savor everything he can. Meanwhile, the ogres tell Kaijin that their village was attacked by the orcs. The ogre leader explains that even though they fought bravely, they suffered a surprise attack and the enemies were wearing armor normally used by humans. Upon hearing this, Kaijin asserts that the orcs could never manage to gather equipment of that level on their own. The ogre leader responds that during the attack, they saw an evil servant wearing a mask. Upon hearing this, the goblins and Kaijin are shocked, as they cannot believe the orcs are allied with a demon lord. The ogre leader shares with great sadness that out of the 300 inhabitants of his village, only 6 survive. At that moment, Rimuru interrupts the conversation and says that he now understands why they attacked them with such determination. Next, he asks what they intend to do from then on. The ogre leader responds that he will gather forces to face the orcs once again. Rimuru asks if they know where the enemy army is located. Realizing that the leader does not answer, he understands that they actually do not have any concrete plan yet. Faced with this, Rimuru makes a proposal. He asks if the ogres would be interested in becoming his subordinates, stating that he can offer food and a safe place to live. The ogre leader responds that if they accept this proposal, Rimuru's entire village will end up involved in their vengeance. Rimuru explains that this would not just be a favor to them, because the orcs possess an army of around 1,000 soldiers and still rely on the support of a demon lord. Next, Rigurd adds, saying that the orcs likely intend to dominate the entire Great Forest of Jura. Rimuru continues saying that furthermore, if anything happens to the ogres, he will fight alongside them, because one never abandons a companion. Upon hearing these words, the ogre leader responds with the same sentiment. The following morning, he seeks out Rimuru and explains that the ogres are a warrior people and do not usually serve anyone. But if their master is truly strong, they will take pride in serving him. Then he asks if this agreement can last only until the orcs are defeated. Rimuru responds that when the battle ends, they will be free to do whatever they desire. Upon hearing this response, he announces that everyone has accepted his proposal, and from that moment on they officially begin serving him. Rimuru then asks all the survivors to draw closer, as he intends to give a name to each of them. The ogres accept, and as soon as Rimuru finishes naming them, he faints due to the massive consumption of magical energy. When he wakes up, Rimuru asks what happened. The ogre leader explains that his name is now Benimaru. Next, the clan's princess and Benimaru's sister introduces herself as Shuna, while the ogre holding Rimuru in her arms reveals her name is Shen. Shortly after, Rimuru sees the elderly warrior, who is now named Hakiro. Next, he looks at another of the ogres and asks his name, and he responds that his name is now Sawe. Rimuru then asks about the last of the 6 survivors. They explain that he is spending his time in Kaijin's workshop. Afterward, the ogre himself enters the room and introduces himself as Kirobe, surprising Rimuru because he appears to be a completely ordinary person. Meanwhile, in the Great Forest of Jura, the orc army continues its advance. At night, on the shores of the lake where the lizardmen reside, several scouts inform their leader that they have spotted a massive army of orcs to the south of the lake, with every indication that they intend to invade their territory. Upon hearing that it is the orcs, the lizardman king orders everyone to immediately begin preparations for war. One of his subordinates asks how many enemies were spotted. The messenger responds that the army numbers approximately 200,000 soldiers, leaving everyone thoroughly terrified. The king then wonders how anyone could possibly feed such an absurd number of warriors. The other lizardmen comment that, according to rumors, the orcs completely destroyed an ogre village, and at that point the king interrupts the conversation, asserting that if there is anyone capable of commanding an army of that size, it can only be the legendary orc lord. The revelation leaves everyone present deeply impressed and alarmed. The king continues to explain that the orc lord is a monster capable of devouring the fear of his own allies, making them even more dangerous. For that reason, everyone must fight with all their strength and also seek reinforcements from other races. Next, the king calls his son Gabiru and entrusts him with a very important mission. Meanwhile, in Rimuru's village, Hakiro trains the young warriors with swordsmanship lessons. Atop a hill, Benimaru explains to Rimuru that the orc lord is a terrible creature capable of consuming the fear of his own subordinate. After hearing this explanation and considering the possibility that an orc lord was responsible for the attack on the ogre village, Rimuru asks Benimaru if he can think of any other explanation. Benimaru responds that he is not entirely sure, but remembers a very important detail. Before the attack, an evil being appeared in his village, offering him a name. When Benimaru refused the offer, that individual departed while casting curses against everyone. Rimuru asks if perhaps he held a grudge because of the refusal. Benimaru responds that this could indeed be the explanation, and tries to recall the name of that stranger. At that moment, Sawe appears and informs them that the man's name was Jelmud. Shortly after, he also notifies Rimuru that he has spotted a group of lizardmen who apparently intend to negotiate with the goblin village, and that they may arrive at Rimuru's village at any moment. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, Gabiru proceeds to negotiate with the goblin villages, complaining that his father is displaying fear in the face of the massive orc army. Suddenly, one of his subordinates remarks that Gabiru should take his father's place as leader. Gabiru gets quite surprised and responds that he is still far from being as grand as his father. However, the same subordinate insists, saying that Gabiru is an exceptional leader, and that, furthermore, he received a name, becoming far more powerful than the rest. Those words stroke Gabiru's pride, and he declares that as soon as the battle against the orcs ends, he will take the throne. A few days later in Rimuru's village, the artisans celebrate happily over the excellent silk that Shuna managed to produce. At that moment, Rimuru arrives, being carried in Shin's arms, and asks how the work is progressing. Shuna gets very emotional and says that the clothing Master Kaijin crafted is extremely easy to wear. Rimuru responds that he is very happy about that, and Shin tells Rimuru that they must continue on their way. But before they leave, Shuna asks her friend if she is comfortable with her work as a secretary, and Shin says she is. Then Shuna takes Rimuru and tells Shin that she could also take care of the great Lord Rimuru by herself, which causes the two of them to start bickering over him. But soon Shuna asks Rimuru whom he prefers to take care of him, and he responds that she should weave the silk, but could assist him in her free time. In this manner, he manages to soothe her so they can continue on their path. Upon arriving at the dining hall, they encounter a few ogres, who ask if they are there to eat. Rimuru mentions that Shin brought him to try something she cooked, and asks if they want to join them. This surprises the ogres, who refuse, and Hakuro along with Sawe withdraw from the room, leaving only Benimaru. Rimuru sits down and observes a nervous Benimaru, wondering why the others reacted that way. Suddenly, Shin appears with the food, and Rimuru realizes why the others did not want to join him, so he gathers the courage to try it. And just as he is about to eat, he shoves everything into Gobta's mouth, who immediately begins to feel very strange as his face turns completely purple. That is why Rimuru tells Shin that the next time she cooks something, Benimaru must taste it first. On the other hand, Gabiru keeps obtaining the cooperation of neighboring goblin villages, and upon being informed that he has already recruited 7,000 goblins, he asks his soldiers where they should head next. They say they should go to a village that managed to tame direwolves. In addition, they comment that their leader is a slime. Gabiru hears this and says that if the slime joins them, they will be able to control the direwolves once again. Back at the village, we can see Sawe and Kaijin talking about how to make swords, while Rimuru observes and thinks that despite not understanding what they are talking about, he cannot find a good moment to withdraw. Suddenly, Rigurd enters and tells Rimuru that an envoy from the lizardmen has arrived. Upon arriving where the lizardmen are, Rimuru meets Gabiru, who after a dramatic entrance says that there are orcs invading the great forest. But seeing whom he is talking to, he turns around to tell his soldiers that he sees no goblins, then goes back to talking to them and says he heard that among them there is someone who managed to tame the direwolf, which is why he will make them officers of his army. Rimuru responds that they did not tame them, and that he merely formed an alliance with them. Gabiru hears this and sneeringly says that being a slime, that is impossible, so Rimuru summons Ranga, who quickly comes face to face with Gabiru and says his master ordered him to listen to his proposals. Gabiru says he has precious fur and a very imposing presence, but that it is disappointing that his master is a slime, making it very evident that he was deceived, which is why to help him he will defeat the slime himself. This provokes Ranga, who prepares to attack, when suddenly Gobta appears and surprises everyone, since they believed he had died. So Ranga says that if he defeats the lizard, he will consider his proposal. Rimuru, for his part, tells Gobta that if he wins, he will ask Kurobi to make a special weapon for him. Otherwise, he will be punished with Shin's food. Gobta, upon hearing this, becomes very motivated, and the moment the battle begins, he uses shadow movement to finish off Gabiru. After everyone congratulates him, Rimuru steps forward to say he will have his weapon made. To the lizardmen, he says that if they want help with the orcs, he will consider the possibility. During the night, Sawe informs everyone that the orc army numbers 200,000 troops, and that they apparently plan to regroup in lizardman territory. Upon hearing this, Rimuru asks what they think about it. Kaijin replies that the orcs are very clumsy, and therefore someone is likely controlling them. So Rimuru says that it might be a demon lord. Benimaru interrupts to say he does not believe it is a demon lord, and that it is possibly an orc lord. Suddenly, Sawe informs them that one of his clones patrolling the village encountered someone very strange. Rimuru asks him to inquire who it is, and Sawe answers that it is a dryad. This surprises everyone, so Rimuru gives the order to let her in. Suddenly, a bright light appears above the table, giving way to a woman who introduces herself as Trini. She is a dryad and tells Rimuru that she is there to ask a favor. She wants him to defeat the orc lord, which surprises everyone. So Benimaru says that it is a selfish request coming from someone who just appeared out of nowhere. He then asks why she is in that place, since there are races stronger than the goblins to defeat the orc lord. Trini answers that this is true, and that if the ogres had their full strength, they would have gone to them. But even so, she would not ignore Rimuru, since if the orc lord decides to attack their home, the dryads could not defend themselves. Rimuru, upon hearing this, says that the orc lord was just a theory to them, and Trini replies that the dryads know everything about the forest, which is why she can confirm that the orc lord exists. Faced with this situation, Rimuru says he needs some time to think, as he is going to help Kaijin right now. Later, we see that the meeting continues with Trini in the room, and Rimuru asks if anyone has any idea what the orcs want. Shuna says she wants to know, and asks Sawe if he inspected their village after the attack. This causes confusion for Rimuru, so Benimaru explains that they are talking about corpses, and that now their theory is that they feed on them. Suddenly, the dryad says that the unique skill Starved is a skill with which the orc lord is born. Its influence reaches those in his service, causing them to devour everything like locusts, while simultaneously consuming the strength of their victims and using it as nourishment. Rimuru, upon hearing this, is quite impressed. Then, very calmly, he states that he cannot guarantee they will be safe, since all the races residing in the village are food that could attract them even further. Then Trini relates that they managed to discover that an evil servant is responsible for the emergence of the orc lord. Upon finishing her words, she stands up to ask Rimuru once again to defeat the orc lord, since they know that he received the protection of the dragon Veldora, subdued the direwolves, and became the patron of the Kaijin. This makes Rimuru think, so he asks the Great Sage if he can trust her, and the Great Sage responds that the Dryads are the guardians of the Great Juro Forest and administer divine justice upon those who harm it. Suddenly, Shin hugs Rimuru and tells Trini that the Orc Lord is no match for him and, therefore, accepts her request. Upon hearing this, Rimuru returns to his slime form and tells the Dryad that he accepts her request. Then he tells everyone that they must now accept the alliance with the Lizardmen, but he would prefer to discuss the alliance with someone other than Gabaru. Therefore, Sawe asks if he would like him to speak personally with the chieftain of the Lizardmen. Rimuru responds that yes, he would like that, since the alliance with the Lizardmen is essential for the battle. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, Gabaru wakes up and remembers that he was defeated by Gobta, and then convinces his followers that that goblin is the master of the forest. Suddenly, Gabaru notices that someone unknown is among them, and this person introduces himself as Laplace, a servant of Lord Jelmud, and informs them that apparently the orc army is already under the control of the orc lord. Gabaru, upon hearing this, says that he intends to become the leader of the Lizardmen once he finishes off the orcs, but apparently that will be too late, so he sets off for his home to claim the throne. Meanwhile, in the marshlands, the Lizardman chieftain is thinking about how to fight against the orcs, when suddenly one of his servants says that a stranger is demanding an audience, so the chieftain orders to let him in. Sawe enters the room and tells the chieftain that he is a messenger bringing the words of his master. Gabaru's father is informed that his master desires an alliance with the Lizardmen, and the chieftain responds that he does not know who his master is. So Sawe says that his master is the great Rimuru Tempest, who upon receiving a personal request from the Dryads, swore to defeat the orc army. This surprises the chieftain, so Sawe says that he must take into consideration that the orc army is led by an orc lord. Suddenly, one of the guards interrupts to tell Sawe that he has never heard of Rimuru and that he is probably crying out of fear of the orc lord. The chieftain apologizes for the words of his subordinate and says that judging by his aura, Sawe must be an ogre from the southeast. The ogre responds that he is no longer an ogre, because his master gave him the name Sawe. This surprises the chieftain, who says he will accept the offer on the condition that he meets Rimuru Tempest. So Sawe says that in that case they will have an audience in 7 days, and that he should try not to engage in battle until then. Sawe leaves, and the chieftain notifies his army that in 7 days they will have reinforcements, which is why they must conserve their forces for the battle. 4 days later, we can see the lizardmen killing an orc that was trying to enter the cave, expressing surprise at how strong it was, which makes them wonder if they will be able to endure 3 more days defending themselves. Suddenly, Gabiru appears to say that if they merely defend themselves, they will end up exhausting their strength. Then Gabiru approaches his father and informs him that 7,000 goblins are waiting for orders to fight. In addition, he asks why they remain in that place in the face of an orc attack. His father responds that when he was not present, they received an offer of alliance, and therefore, as long as the alliance is not finalized, the best option is to focus on defending. Gabiru, upon hearing this, says that his father has grown old, and with the help of his soldiers, he usurps his place as chieftain. Suddenly, one of his followers brings his father's trident, and the moment he holds it, a bright aura surrounds his body. Gabiru then asks the water vortex spear if it accepts him as its leader, and subsequently tells the soldiers that now they will see how the lizardmen fight. Later, on the outside, the orc army enters the marshland, where Gabiru and his soldiers manage to eliminate some of them. On the other hand, Rimuru, together with his troop, moves toward the marshlands, when suddenly Sawe, who is scouting the surroundings, informs Rimuru that he found a group of lizardmen fighting, and that it is led by the chieftain's daughter, so he asks if he should help her, and Rimuru responds that yes, in case it is necessary. Later, the entire troop arrives at the site of the battle, where Sawe tells Rimuru that the chieftain's daughter is injured, so Rimuru gives her a healing potion, and upon waking up, the chieftain's daughter asks Rimuru in surprise who he is, and he responds that he is Rimuru Tempest, and the chieftain's daughter begs him to please save her father. Rimuru, upon hearing her, asks what happened, so she relates that her brother initiated a rebellion and imprisoned the chieftain in order to face the orc army alone, which is why, despite knowing that they broke the promise to wait for him, she begs him to please save them from extinction. Suddenly Shin approaches and says that she is demonstrating her greatness by accepting the grand power of her master. Faced with this situation, Rimuru says that she will be her father's representative and asks if she opposes forming an alliance. The chieftain's daughter responds that she does not oppose, and in this manner they enter into an alliance. So Rimuru asks Sawe to use his powers to go to where the chieftain of the lizardmen is. Meanwhile, in the marshlands, Gabiru begins to lose the battle, and when he finds himself surrounded, he realizes that the orcs acquired their skills by devouring them. Suddenly, a large orc appears, and Gabiru, thinking that he is the orc lord, challenges him to single combat, but the large orc says that he is an orc general, and then recognizes that Gabiru is very brave for fighting alone, which is why he accepts the challenge. On the other hand, Laplace tells his master Gelmud that everything is happening as planned. Gelmud, who is watching the battle through a crystal ball, tells his son that he is very close to controlling the entire forest. Suddenly Trainee appears before them and says she will expel them from the forest for disturbing it, then summons an elemental spirit that launches a power against them. Laplace manages to stop it, but as a result loses an arm. Faced with this situation, Laplace says that either way they have already achieved their goal, and uses his powers to escape. Meanwhile, in the marshland, Gabiru and the orc general wage a fierce battle. Suddenly, in a heroic attempt to win the fight, Gabiru is hit by an attack from the general, and after knocking him to the ground, he approaches to say that lizards ought to crawl. He then launches the final blow, but is stopped by Gobta. Gabiru thinks that he is the leader of the village and asks if he is there to help them. Suddenly Ranga appears to say that Gobta is the leader of the goblin riders and that they are there by order of their master Rimuru. So the orc general says that although he does not quite know who they are, he will have to kill them. Suddenly, several explosions occur in the middle of the orc army, so the orc general says he will soon put an end to the invasion. In another part of the marshlands, we can see Benemuru, Shin, and Hakiru emerging from the smoke of the black flame. After their epic appearance, Benemuru asks the orcs if they remember when they devoured his village, provoking another massive explosion. Returning to where Gabiru is, the orc general says that the arrival of useless monsters like them will be in vain, which makes Ranga extremely angry. So he uses his power to create great wind tornadoes and a massive black lightning bolt that strikes the orc general. In this manner, goblins, wolves, and lizardmen manage to confront the massive orc army. Rimuru observes from the sky while the enemy army vanishes and wonders how the chieftain of the lizardmen is doing. In the caves, we can see Sawe and the chieftain's daughter arriving at the dungeon. The daughter then gives her father a big hug, and, while they leave that place, tells him that she was chosen as his representative, and that an alliance was formed because of it. Suddenly, a large orc appears, so Sawe quickly restrains him with his powerful threads and says that messing with the ogre village will be his greatest regret, causing him to explode. Gelmud, who is watching everything from a distance, destroys his crystal ball furious and flees, thinking they are going to kill him. On the battlefield, Rimuru manages to locate the Orc Lord, so he puts on his mask and decides to end everything. Suddenly, Gelmud lands on the battlefield and asks how they dare ruin the plans of the great Gelmud. He then relates that the new demon lord was about to be born, and that was why he gave out so many names and planted seeds all over the forest. Gabiru, upon seeing him, becomes very pleased and asks if he is in that place to help them. Gelmud becomes extremely angry and responds that he ought to turn into food for the Orc Lord and thus help him evolve. Suddenly, the Orc Lord asks a question to Gelmud, wanting to know what he refers to when he speaks of making him evolve into a demon lord. Gelmud responds that he will be the demon lord Orc Disaster and will rule all of the great Jura forest. The Orc Lord, upon hearing this, remains silent, so Gelmud becomes very annoyed and tells everyone that they have no time, which is why he will have to interfere, and tries to kill Gabiru, who is saved by one of his last remaining soldiers. Then Gelmud, realizing that he failed to kill him, says that now he will experience the true power of a superior being and launches another attack. But the moment it is about to hit him, Rimuru easily stops it with his hand and asks if that is truly all. Then, immediately after, he gives Gabiru healing potions for his men and, using his steel threads, restrains Gelmud to strike him. After striking him, Rimuru breaks the threads and says that for a superior being, he is very weak. So Gelmud becomes even angrier and says he will make him regret what he is doing. Gelmud quickly orders the Orc Lord to fight, but the Orc Lord cuts off his head with his sword and then devours him. In this manner, he evolves into a demon lord and states that he is the one who will devour the world. So Benimaru orders Shin to attack and tells Rimuru that they will take care of it. While Shin attacks the demon lord, Hakiru manages to sever his head, but the enemy uses his healing power to place it back where it was. Suddenly, Sawe appears and with his sticky steel threads restrains the demon so that Benimaru can use his combination explosion with lightning. And then they observe that the Orc Disaster remains intact. Seeing this, Rimuru begins advancing toward the Demon Lord and tells the Great Sage that he must finish him. So the Great Sage switches to auto battle mode and, utilizing Rimuru's body, begins a fierce battle against him, who, after regenerating the arm he lost at the hands of the Great Sage, says that this time he will eat him and restrains him with his hands. But the Great Sage uses the Flame Transform Circle to engulf the Demon Lord in flames and tells Rimuru that his work is finished. Suddenly, Geld begins to laugh and makes the flames vanish, until Rimuru says that now he will handle it himself, as he believes he has discovered how to defeat him. With full control of his body, Rimuru tells him that now he will fight seriously. This provokes laughter from the Demon Lord, who tells him not to lie and to accept that he will be devoured. Rimuru responds that before that, he is the one who will eat him, and transforms into a slime to devour him. After eating him, Geld's soul tells Rimuru that before becoming the Orc Lord and the Demon Lord, he was searching for a way to obtain food for his people, which is why he decided to trek toward the Great Jura Forest and was then deceived by Gelmud. Geld continues relating that he ate all the monsters and even ate his own people, which is why he cannot lose, because if he dies, all the sins will fall upon his people. Rimuru, upon hearing this, responds that he can rest easy, because his sins will also be devoured. In this manner, Rimuru manages to defeat the Orc Lord, and all the effects on the army disappeared. With this, the massive Orc army ceased its advance, and the war ended. Then Rimuru tells Benimaru that he had promised they would be free once the Orc Lord was devoured and thanks him for the help. Benimaru, upon hearing this, responds that he wants to ask a favor and requests that he accept the loyalty of the Kijin so they can continue serving him. Rimuru asks if they are sure, and the Kijin respond that they do not oppose and will be by his side until they die. On the following day, representatives of each race gather to discuss how things will proceed. Then Rimuru, who was designated as chairman, says that to begin with, he does not intend to accuse the orcs of any crime, since everything was the fault of starvation and any race would have done the same under those conditions. He then clarifies that this is his public stance. Then the chieftain of the lizardmen asks what his personal opinion is, and Rimuru responds that he decided to take on all the sins of the orcs, and therefore, if anyone has any complaints, they ought to speak directly with him. One of the orcs says that this makes no sense, so Rimuru responds that this was his promise to the demon lord Geld. The chieftain of the lizardmen says that this was an unfair response, so Benimaru interrupts to say that there is an immutable rule among all monsters, which is the survival of the fittest, and that ever since they entered into conflict, they were prepared for that. Rimuru then tells the Kijin that they lost their homeland and asks if they have no complaints. Benimaru responds that he would be lying if he said he did not have any, but that if this happens again, they will not let it pass. The chieftain of the lizardmen says he understands his point and asks Rimuru what will happen to the orcs. Rimuru responds that perhaps it sounds like a dream and says that they could work together in such a way that the lizardmen would share a source of water and fish, while the orcs would contribute with their labor. In this manner, all the races of the Great Jura Forest would work together. The orcs become very surprised and ask if they are truly going to be part of this, and Rimuru responds that he will give them housing, and therefore they must work. Then the chieftain of the lizardmen tells Rimuru that it will be an honor to join forces, while Trainee says that the dryads, under his protection, will share the riches of the forest. Suddenly, Trainee stands up to recognize the great Rimuru as the leader of the Great Jura Forest and declares the foundation of the Jura Forest Alliance under the name of the leader Rimuru. Upon finishing the meeting, the leader of the orcs approaches Benimaru to say that an apology is not enough after the damage they caused to his village, which is why he begs on his knees to please take his life as payment and have mercy on the rest. Benimaru responds that after the battle, Rimuru gave them official titles and that he is now responsible for military affairs, which is why in this position he cannot fail to recognize that he is a capable warrior, but he will have no mercy on anyone who opposes the great Rimuru. The surprised orc says that he only wishes to serve him, that he would never reject him. Benimaru responds that then they are servants of the same master, and therefore he will accept his apology, provided that he strives to be useful to Rimuru. While the Kijin depart, the orc swears in the name of his father, King Geld, that he will strive as much as he can. Rimuru, who was observing everything, approaches the orc and says he hopes he inherits his father's wishes. From now on, he will be Geld. In this manner, the new ruler Geld evolves into the Orc King. Next, Rimuru spent 10 days giving names to the 150,000 orcs. Afterward, Rimuru says that he also named the chieftain of the lizardmen, who is now named Abaru, and that his son Gabaru was accused of treason. While in the cave of the lizardmen, Abaru tells his son that he will be expelled and exiled. Gabaru is expelled while walking through the marshlands. He meets his 3 most loyal soldiers, who say they will follow him. On the other hand, we can see Laplace talking with a person who asks what should be done about the slime. Laplace says that if he needs help, he will not charge much, and names him Demon Lord Clayman. Months after defeating the Orc Lord, Rimuru tells Ranga how the orcs evolved into high orcs and improved their techniques thanks to Kaijin. In this manner, Rimuru's village improved until it became a city. Suddenly, Sawe interrupts them to inform that several hundred knights are heading toward the city. Then we see that days earlier, King Dwargo informs his allies that the war has ended. He then says he made the decision to see with his own eyes who this slime is. When returning to the present, King Dwargo lands in the city. Then Rimuru tells the Kijin that if there is a fight, they ought to evacuate the city. Suddenly, Kaijin kneels before the king to say that it is a pleasure to see him again. Rimuru approaches to introduce himself as a slime, but says he prefers that he not call him that, since he is the leader of the Jura Forest Alliance. Next, Rimuru changes to his human form and tells the king that this is not his true form, merely that it will be more comfortable to converse this way. The king responds that he will get straight to the point and says he wants to know who he truly is, which is why he will reveal his nature with his sword, since in boasting of being the leader of the forest, it seems he must show what his standing is. Rimuru draws his sword, and then the king tells his allies that an honest battle is the fastest way to settle things. The two prepare to begin the fight, when suddenly Trainee appears to say that she will be the witness to the duel. The battle begins, and after several attacks from both, the king uses his best strike, which Rimuru manages to block. So Trainee declares Rimuru the winner of the duel. The king says that after crossing swords, he understands that he is not an evil being, and furthermore is quite surprised that Rimuru managed to keep up with his heaven and earth lightning strike. Rimuru says that that was merely a coincidence, since his master always uses that strike, and he saw him training many times. This surprises the king, who upon realizing that Hakiru is the instructor, says it is an honor to see him again. At night, everyone is dining together, and the king asks Rimuru if he has any interest in making a treaty with him. When he hears this, Rimuru is quite surprised. So the king says that if he assumes control of the entire great forest, he will have a fortune and power that will surpass those of his nation, which is why it would be good to have someone supporting him. At that moment, Rimuru asks if he is sure, since if that happens, it would mean recognizing a group of monsters as a country. The king responds that he is sure of it, so Rimuru accepts the agreement. The king asks what the name of his nation is. Rimuru becomes nervous, as he had never thought about it, and says that it is called the Jura Tempest Federation. Everyone is quite impressed, so Rigurd says that in that case, the city will be named Rimuru City. Sometime after forming the alliance, King Gazel Dorgo returns to the city and says he is there to give him a gift, then hands over Vesta and says that it would be a waste if such a talented man did nothing, which is why he delivers him to work in his service. Kaijin, upon hearing this, says that Vesta's knowledge would be quite useful to them. The king responds that this is amusing, because the people he used to mistreat are now commanding him. Next, he comments that this is part of the alliance and that they ought to make the land where they live a leader in new skills. Afterward, he tells Vesta that he must continue his studies in that place, and he responds that he will not disappoint him. Kaijin says it will be an honor to have a researcher like him, and that he will take responsibility for his action. Rimuru, upon hearing this, says he trusts Kaijin and welcomes Vesta. The king, seeing that everything went well, departs for his city. Rimuru then turns to ask Gabiru what he is looking for. Gabiru responds that he wants to join his ranks and promises he will be very useful. Suddenly, Gabiru's sister appears and explains to Rimuru that, unlike her brother, she was not expelled, but her father, Abaru, sent her to gain experience, which is why Rimuru decides to accept them. After accepting them, Rimuru decided to name them in the following manner. Gabiru's men evolved into Dragonutes and were placed under Saue's command, which is why they were sent to cultivate plants in the cave where Veldora disappeared. Next, Rimuru says he built a laboratory for Vesta, who works to create healing potions with the plants from the cave. On the other hand, in his castle, Clayman shows his fighters how the battle against the orcs unfolded. One of them becomes very excited and quickly sets off toward Tempest to investigate Rimuru. Rimuru is relaxed in his city and can sense that a powerful magic is heading toward him, so he moves away from the city. The girl who wants to meet him arrives and then introduces herself as the Soul Dragonoid, also known as Destroyer. She relates that she heard he is the strongest in the forest, and while observing, Rimuru realizes that she is extremely powerful. So he introduces himself to her as Rimuru Tempest, the leader of the city, and says he is surprised that she knows this. She responds that her Milim I can measure the magic of everything she sees. This surprises Rimuru, who thinks that perhaps he cannot defeat her. She asks if that is his true form, and if the humanoid that defeated Jelmud was merely a form. Rimuru transforms and asks what she is looking for in those parts. She responds that she merely wanted to introduce herself. Shin appears by surprise and tries to attack Milim Nava, while Ranga carries Rimuru away. Shin's attack is useless, as Milim manages to stop them with ease. Sawe restrains her with his threads so that the Kijin can attack. After the attack from the Kijin, Milim begins to laugh, and without a single scratch, emerges from the fire to defend herself. Rimuru returns to the battlefield to heal the Kijin, and says that he himself will take care of it. Milim asks if he is going to face her. Rimuru responds that yes, and says that if she trusts her power so much, why not try one of his attacks? She accepts amidst laughter and states that if he fails to cause any damage to her, he must swear to be her subordinate. Rimuru accepts, but knowing that she is stronger than him, decides to give her honey instead of attacking her with his powers. Milim is surprised upon tasting the honey. Rimuru says that if she accepts her defeat, he will give her more honey. Milim begins to think and says it is better to consider it a draw. She also promises not to mess with any of them. Rimuru accepts and gives her a jar of honey to prevent them from being attacked. Later, we can see Milim eating honey when she suddenly asks Rimuru if he ever thought about becoming a demon lord. Rimuru responds that he has no interest, as that would bring him many problems. She asks in surprise what he does for fun. Then Rimuru says he is busy with many things and asks what is so fun about being a demon lord. She responds that it is not fun, merely that she can control people and monsters. Rimuru says that then she gets bored, which surprises Milim, who asks Rimuru what is more fun than being a demon lord. Rimuru responds that he will tell her, on the condition that she call him Mr. Rimuru. She refuses and says she will call him Great Milim, so Rimuru says it is better if they use their names. Milim accepts, so Rimuru says he will take her to the city, but that she cannot cause trouble. Suddenly, Gabiru appears to ask who that brat is, which makes Milim extremely angry. She strikes him and sends him flying all the way to the city. In the city, she says that now she is in a good mood and will let him go. Rimuru approaches Milim to say that she cannot hit people just because they annoy her. From now on, hitting is forbidden. Later, from atop a stage, Rimuru tells the entire city that Milim will stay for a few days. Upon learning who she is, the goblins begin to celebrate. She says she decided to live in the city and that now they can count on her in case anything happens. Rimuru is surprised by what just happened and thinks that since she is a demon lord, it would be strange for them to call each other friends. Milim hears his thoughts and says he is right. Furthermore, they will call each other besties. In this manner, one of the most dangerous demon lords became part of the Jura Tempest Federation. Rimuru finds himself meditating with his male friends during the night, when Hakuryu says he is worried about Milim, since he never imagined that a demon lord would arrive on her own. Rimuru responds that she promised not to cause damage, to which Kaijin says that what is worrying is what the other demon lords will do, since declaring Milim as his friend means that the entire city is under her protection. The others say that this disrupts the balance of power, and without Rimuru's presence, everyone would already be dead. Hakuryu says that now that Rimuru is besties with Milim, he will entrust everything to him. In Bluemond, we can see Beryard and Fuse talking about what to do with Rimuru. They make the decision to go see him and, together with the adventurers, set off for the city. Meanwhile, Rimuru is in the caves where Vesta shows that he created a crystal ball to communicate with King Gazel, to whom he has already reported the situation with Milim. Rimuru asks him to keep him informed. Gabiru tells Rimuru that their healing potions are now called full potions, since they possess 99% purity. Vesta tells Rimuru that in the armed nation of Dworgen, they can only produce them with 98% purity, and that now he has managed to overcome that barrier. Rimuru analyzes his prototype and says it is identical to a full potion. Kaijin, Gabiru, and Rimuru congratulate Vesta, who with tears in his eyes thanks them for their words. Then, Rimuru relates that he was thinking of selling the potions. Kaijin says it is better to reserve the most effective potions for the true elite warriors. Vesta agrees and tells Rimuru that the potions sold in the Dworgen Kingdom are low potions, which are produced from a diluted high potion. He asks if he thinks it would be possible to negotiate with King Gazel, so that low potions are also produced in Tempest. Rimuru says he thinks it is a good idea and leaves the cave together with Kaijin, but upon stepping outside, the two witness an explosion. Rimuru heads toward the city, where he finds many people gathered. Sae informs that a new guest has arrived and that Milim assumed control of the situation. Rimuru approaches to see what happened and finds Rigurd injured. Then he observes a person lying on the ground. Milim says that that person was mocking everyone, and she decided to take care of the situation. Milim relates what happened, expecting him to give her a compliment, but Rimuru says that she caused a disturbance and will be deprived of lunch because of it. This angers Milim, who returns in outrage to strike the body of the unconscious man. Then Rimuru gives her his lunch so that she calms down. While she eats lunch in the same room, Rimuru asks the visitors why they are in the city. Their leader responds that he will not answer to a simple slime. Rimuru responds that, despite being a simple slime, he is stronger, and if he continues with that attitude, they could become enemies. He then asks if he wants to be responsible for turning the entire Juro forest against him. The visitors respond that if he is the leader of the forest, then everyone is weak, and that he ought not to boast so much merely to please Lady Milim. Rimuru responds that he is a slime, and yet governs 30% of the forest. If they are being serious, they will have to declare war. With these words, Rimuru manages to make the other individual say that Lord Carrion ordered them to investigate some strange monsters to serve Milim. Milim becomes angry, because Carrion broke his promise. Rimuru tells the visitors that they may leave, but before that, asks them to tell Carrion that if he wishes to talk, he can choose a date and invite him. After the visitors leave, Rimuru tells Milim that he wants to know everything about the demon Lord Carrion. Milim says she cannot tell anything, because they swore not to interfere with one another. Rimuru realizes that she knows him and asks if that promise was made only to Carrion or also to the other demon lords. Milim tries to resist, until Rimuru says that if she tells him, he will give her a new weapon. This excites Milim, so she relates that the demon lords Clayman, Carrion, Frey, and herself used Gelmud to create an artificial demon lord to pass the time. It did not amount to much, but Rimuru says that they involved themselves and that perhaps because of that they now wish to eliminate them. Rigurd says that they ought to consult Trainee, while Milim begs Rimuru to give her new weapon. The Kingdom of Falmouth, which is a commercial powerhouse known as the gateway to the Western nations, sends a team to investigate the Orc Lord, led by a man named Yaum. In the forest, we can see how this group encounters the 3 adventurers and their leader, who were being pursued by a night spider. Yaum orders his group to fall into formation to fight, when Gobta appears and kills the monster with a single strike. In Tempest, Rimuru tells Fuse and Yaum that he is the representative of the city. He asks if the kingdoms of Blumund and Falmouth are there to investigate. But when Fuse is about to answer, Yaum interrupts to say that it cannot be that a slime is in command of everything. Soshin strikes him with her sword and Rimuru apologizes, subsequently saying that he wishes to get along with humans so that in the future they can engage in trade, given that they possess diplomatic relations with the armed nation of Dworgen. Fuse is surprised. He cannot believe that Dworgen recognizes a nation of monsters as legitimate. Vesta enters the room to tell Fuse that everything Rimuru is saying is true. Fuse says he will cooperate, but beforehand would like to see proof that they are allies of the armed nation of Dworgen. Rimuru says he understands that and offers that they remain in the city so that they can verify that they are not a threat. Rimuru asks Yaum if they are going to make an agreement. Yaum asks what he suggests for that, so Rimuru says he wants him and his group to be the champions who defeated the Orc Lord. This means they must tell everyone that they were merely assisted by the city of Tempest, so that the rest of the kingdoms know them as trustworthy monsters who aided the champion who defeated the Orc Lord. Yaum is enjoying the sunset when Rimuru appears to ask if he has thought about his proposal. Yaum responds that the city is incredible, and that after getting to know it, he realized that they are not evil. Next, he relates that they accepted the mission intending to pretend they had died along the way and go to a safe country to be free. His decision is to trust Rimuru and asks that he allow him to call him boss, since he will be under his orders. In Clayman's castle, we can see him asking Tyr if she did not see her arrive. She responds that she is part of the moderate Harlequin alliance, which is why he should trust her. Tyr reveals herself and Clayman says he received news from Mulan, who claims that Milim became interested in those monsters. Tyr says she has the results of her investigation, and relates that Frey has no interest in involving herself with the Great Jura Forest, because Charybdis is going to revive. This surprises Clayman, who orders Tyr to investigate the location of the seal in order to tame Charybdis. In the forest, Phobio, who was struck by Milim during his visit to Tempest, is extremely angry for not having fulfilled his mission. One of his companions says that with Milim in the city, they will be able to do nothing. He responds that he already knows they can do nothing, but that his pride will not let him leave empty-handed. So as not to bother Lord Carrion, he will take revenge once his injuries heal. His companion tries to say that that will not work, to which Phobio responds that he already knows. They hear loud laughter and can see an individual with a clown mask emerging from the bushes to say he well understands the frustration he must be feeling. He introduces himself as Footman of the moderate Harlequin alliance. Behind him appears Tyr, who says she is not his enemy. Phobio asks angrily what they want. Footman responds that they were summoned by his anger and his hatred, and that now he wants to know what made him so angry. One of his companions says that it is not necessary to listen to them, and calls the Harlequins minions of the demon Lord Carrion. Footman asks if they desire power and says that they can grant it to them. There is a great risk, but if they manage to overcome it, the power will be immense, for it is the power of Charybdis. If they do not want it, they will leave. While they are leaving, Phobio tells them to stop, and asks what they stand to gain by doing this. The two respond that they merely want special treatment once he becomes a demon lord. They relate that they discovered where Charybdis is, and that they trust he will be capable of mastering it. Phobio accepts the offer and tells his companions that he will depart, as he does not wish to cause trouble for Carrion. In addition, he asks that they report that he will relinquish his position as a beastman and abandon his service. His companion wishes him good luck and, while walking away, thinks that Phobio will be capable of mastering Charybdis. In the city of Tempest, we can see Milim playing with the Kijin girls in the hot springs, while on the other side, Rimuru laments not being with her and asks Fuse how much longer he plans to stay. He responds that he ceased suspecting they were a threat long ago, and that he is staying because it is a very comfortable place to relax. Rimuru asks what happened with Yaum and his friends, given that he promised to help them look like heroes. Fuse responds that he has already finished the preparations and laid the groundwork to spread word that they were responsible for defeating the Orc Lord. He stands up to leave, and before he departs, Rimuru says he wants to build a road from Tempest to the kingdom of Bluemund. This surprises Fuse, who says it would be great, but that it would cost a lot of money. Rimuru responds that he should not worry, as the road will facilitate trade. Tempest will be responsible for the physical labor. Back in the forest, we can see Phobio along with the Harlequins arriving at the cave, where Footman explains that when they spoke of mastering it, they meant he ought to take Charybdis into his body so that the two merge into a single being. Phobio thinks about it, and, after being manipulated by the Harlequins, accepts. He then enters the cave alone. Outside the cave, Footman tells Tyr that he is a servant of Carrion with more muscle than brain. Milim and Elen arrive in the city the following morning with a wagon full of monsters to eat. Shin detects a new presence, so everyone stands guard. A dryad similar to Trainee appears to say that she is Trya, Trainee's younger sister, and informs that a great calamity is approaching, since the Calamity-class monster Charybdis has revived, and her sisters, including Trainee, went out to stop it, but are no match for it. In addition, it seems that the monster is heading toward Tempest, which is why she advises them to set up defenses. Everyone heads to the meeting room, where Trier relates that Charybdis is a violent ruler of the skies, which was to be expected, since it is a child of Veldora. This scares Rimuru greatly, who thinks that it is coming after him, given that its father is inside his body. Fuse says that Charybdis is a greater threat than a demon lord, since it is not possible to negotiate with it. Trya tells Rimuru that the situation could not be worse, for Charybdis summoned 13 Megalodons. Milim begins to laugh and says that that beast will be no match for them, when suddenly Shin says that she will not be allowed to fight, as this is an affair of the city, and Shuna says that she may only interfere in case Rimuru needs her assistance. Rimuru orders everyone to prepare for battle, and Fuse asks if he knows what he is facing. Rimuru says that they have the support of King Gazel, given that they signed a treaty. Monsters are not like humans. Without their king, they are lost. Fuse responds that he is thinking like a human, so Rimuru relates that in his other life he was a human and belonged to the same world as Shizu, who before dying entrusted him with everything she had as someone from her homeland. In addition, he promises to heal her heart of its wound, since the one responsible for it is the demon lord Leon. Rimuru and all his allies are waiting for the enemy. When the first Megalodon appears, Benimaru manages to neutralize it easily, but Shuna, who observes from above alongside Rimuru, is surprised to realize that her brother's attack was not enough to destroy the enemy. Rimuru orders them to continue following the plan. We can see Geld holding one of the massive sharks so that his soldiers attack it, but upon realizing that his soldiers fail to cause any damage, he wonders what to do to stop it. Gabaru appears to help him. On the other hand, the various species under Rimuru's command and the troops of the Dwarf King exert themselves to stop the enemy. From a mountain, Rimuru alongside the Kijin observes the battle. When Milim appears to ask that he let her fight, he responds no, and says that she ought to have stayed in the city. In the battle, we can see Sawe together with Sokka managing to overpower a Megalodon and attacking the other enemies. Afterward, we see Ranga together with Shen using their best attacks and managing to finish off another enemy. Meanwhile, in the forest, Hakaru helps Gobta and says it is a disappointment that they fail to finish off even one of them. Therefore, they must practice more. The warriors under Rimuru's command manage to finish off all the Megalodons, so only Charybdis remains. All together they begin to attack, and upon realizing that they fail to cause any damage to it, Rimuru says not to lower their guard, as he has an idea. Charybdis uses its scales to defend itself and manages to repel everyone, in addition to injuring some. When this happens, Rimuru appears to stop them and says that they are fools, as they could rely on him for such cases. He uses gluttony to devour all the enemy's scales, tells them to go rest, and that he will take care of the situation, since the scales regenerate. Therefore, they must rest while he fights and will return to attack when Benimaru gives the order. Rimuru begins a fierce battle with Charybdis, and while the two attack each other, he realizes that it possesses rapid regeneration. To confirm, he asks the Great Sage if that is correct, and it responds that Charybdis possesses the extra skill Ultra Speed Regeneration, and that with this skill, it is estimated that it manages to regenerate its scales in 3 minutes. This surprises Rimuru, who thinks that he has 3 minutes to repeat what he did before. Benimaru from the ground orders all warriors to attack at the same time to aid Rimuru. Rimuru observes the beast and believes that they only managed to cause 30% damage. Charybdis approaches where Rimuru is and insults Milim. Rimuru asks the Great Sage to evaluate the situation. The Great Sage says that there are confirmed life signs inside the body of the beast, and that it possesses an intense rage. Rimuru realizes that Charybdis was not after him, and that now he can ask Milim for help. Upon looking for her, he realizes that she was sleeping, so he wakes her up to say that the beast is searching for her. Upon hearing these words, Milim decides to analyze Charybdis, and realizes that it is using Phobio as its physical body. Rimuru says that she may now fight, and before she goes, asks her to leave him alive so that Phobio can work for the demon lord Carrion. Milim approaches the enemy, and upon seeing her, it begins to attack her. With great ease, she stops its power and then uses Dragon Buster, a skill with which she makes Charybdis explode. Rimuru, attentive to the battle, manages to see Phobio's body and captures him in midair. He brings him to the ground, where using his magic, he absorbs the magic core of Charybdis and consumes it. Dwarf, the envoy of the Dwarf King, appears, and Rimuru says that without his help, they would not have managed to defeat Charybdis. Dwarf responds that they did not do that and asks for an explanation of what just happened. Rimuru says that it was Milim, the powerful demon lord. Dwarf responds that that is a good joke and does not believe she is so powerful. Phobio wakes up and, upon remembering what he did, apologizes to everyone for having caused them damage. But Trainee appears to ask how he knew where Charybdis was sealed. Phobio responds that this was told to him by two harlequins named Tyr and Footman. Trainee draws a mask on the ground and asks if it was any of them. He responds no. Gabiru, upon seeing the drawing, mentions Tyr and says that she is a harlequin, vice president of a group called the Moderate Harlequin Alliance. Rimuru, who observes Milim, overhears when she says she has nothing to do with that, and that perhaps it is Clayman who is planning something in secret. Phobio says that, regardless of who was responsible for the plan, everything is his responsibility, and that this has no relation to the demon lord Carrion. Rimuru says that he can now leave, which surprises him greatly, and Phobio says he thought they were going to kill him. Rimuru responds that Milim does not want his life, and she relates that she has already matured, which is why he can leave. He asks Carrion if he is in agreement. The demon lord Carrion appears and apologizes to Rimuru for what happened. Afterward, he asks if he was the one who defeated Jelma. Rimuru assumes his human form and asks if he is there to avenge him. Carrion responds no and approaches Phobio to strike him, and after doing so, tells Rimuru that now he owes him one, which is why he ought not to hesitate to call him when needed. Rimuru says that, in that case, he would appreciate a non-aggression pact for his country. Carrion responds that, in the name of the Beastmaster of the Animal Kingdom of Eurazania, Carrion swears that he will never raise his sword against Tempest. We can see Hakiru in the middle of the city later, cutting a megalodon for the banquet. While everyone eats during the party, Rimuru is in the hot springs with the Kijin girls and Milim. They take advantage of the moment to thank their bestie for her help. She responds that he was also incredible, and that, in case he planned to become a demon lord, she would not oppose it. Rimuru says he has no intention of becoming one and asks why she became a demon lord. Milim responds that she does not remember and lifts him up to say that, thanks to the fact that she is a demon lord, now she has a bestie. She comments that she already needs to go work, which means they will not see each other for some time. She tells Rimuru that she will ask the other demon lords not to attack his city. Rimuru, along with the girls, wishes her good luck and tells her not to let herself be deceived.